So the movies, again, will have you believe that, like crazy screaming. So what happened in my case is the most painful part, again, is the actual contractions. My wife said that the pushing is just like pressure. And your wife will probably crap herself when she's having a kid, like, because it's just all pressure and push everything out. My wife grabs my head. She proceeds to kind of park her mouth next to my ear and unleash a scream that I would roughly imagine is, you know, not like this, like I'm listening to my music and there's my, you know, there's my blood oximeter and I'm relaxing on the exercise ball, but something equivalent to screaming through a bullhorn in my ear with the Predator cry, like from space. It is the craziest sound I've ever heard in my life. It's about double the intensity I've ever heard my wife yell. And she has no idea where it came from. It's like a wormhole opened up inside her. She reached out and grabbed one of those monsters from the Avengers and just channeled its voice. 5 minutes later, my son was born. So that was incredibly quick pushing. He didn't even have, like, every one of my kids have alien heads. This is why they put a hat on them. Because you've got all those plates that are meant to shove through this tiny little space. It sort of moves them around. They look like Conehead when it's all said and done. There's like a big portion up this way and that way. And then they have the alien eyes too. This is on my chest, by the way. My wife doesn't have a big hairy chest. And he's just like, what's up, you know? And it's the weirdest thing. So your kid's born, and it's a super high oxytocin environment. I'm wearing stage makeup because HD doesn't nobody any favors. But the touch with my kid is like the highest definition touch I've ever had in that moment. Now, it could just be total delirium. But this feeling of like, almost like, hey, Jeans, pleased to meet you. Oh, right, yeah, these are, hey, you're part of me. That's cool. And then even crazier than that, after all of that agony, my son's nursing for like 15 minutes right after he was pushed out. And my wife turns to me and goes, let's have another one. After all of that agony, after all of that pain and just craziness, the brain is just flipped and is like, okay, let's have another one. Now, in the meanwhile, while all this is happening, the midwife is down there kind of kneeling, and like, so an episiotomy happens when they need to create space between to open up the vagina a little bit more. My wife didn't, they either do it surgically or it tears. My wife had some tearing on the inner walls of her vagina, so the nurse is down there just sewing her up, reaching in, sewing her up, and we're just breastfeeding and having a grand old time. And then there's the afterbirth where the placenta gets pushed out, and they're sort of like, what do you want to do with that? We're like, give it to someone for stem cells. I don't know. And to be honest, I don't remember what we actually did with it, because I'll get to that in a second. So like 8 hours later, we went home. Like, we didn't have to stay. Sarah was able to get up and walk. We took Jack home. And then begins kind of the interesting first year. So like I said, it really should be called Fatherhood the first 21 months, not Fatherhood the first 12 months. So now my marginal utility really begins. The closest thing I think we are going to get to time travel in our life is the first 2 months after having your first kid. Because I remember Oktoberfest, kind of, because my son had like baby lederhosen. We took it to a friend's house. He was there during Oktoberfest. He was born on October 2nd. I remember Halloween maybe, the mashed potatoes I made for Thanksgiving, and Christmas. But otherwise, nothing. I blinked and it was 2 months later. It's because you're tired. You're really, 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 really tired. And I think you're also tired because there's some literature on this about the morphology, the brain changes that go on when becoming a new father. Some interesting things happen. You develop certain components of the audio processing portions of your brain to start to tie in with the cries of your kid. Because how many of you had a crying baby on your flight coming into here? You did, you did, you did, you did, you did. I'll talk about that in a second. But all of a sudden, you start to get into wavelengths on your kid, or you're sort of like, oh, they're crying because they're hungry. They're crying because they're sleepy. They're crying because of this. It's very, very strange. But yeah, I finished a master's degree in this period of time. I don't remember how. I did. It was great. But that's the closest thing I think we're ever going to come to time travel. Blink and it's 2 months later and you're going like, where did the time go? That is something that you will experience with children. There's a great saying, which is the days and the months are long, but the years are short. My son's 1 now, and it feels like that. It feels like yesterday. It was bored, but if I spent an entire day with him, it will have felt like I was on some sort of 3-day weekend bender, even though one day has occurred. Like you can't turn off being a dad. You're always on duty, but it's a weird thing. So having a child will cure you of narcissism, at least temporarily, because you realize, like, I always have to be on daddy duty, and I have to be paying attention to this thing. Like, you're doing other stuff, you get really good at multitasking. Like, there I am, like, chopping vegetables, and my son's trying to, like, turn on the stove, and I'm like, buddy, back away, you know, go walk, and I'm still chopping, and I'm stirring this, and I pick him up, and I'll put him on the refrigerator, and I'll be like, play with your magnets, and I'm chopping, and then the mail comes, and he comes crawling after it, and he's tearing stuff down, and you're always on daddy duty, but all of a sudden you find this capacity to you realize that all of your interests are quite important, but you don't have to obsess about them to get them done in a good way. And in fact, having a little distance from all of your interests kind of lets you make better decisions about them. Have you ever been so obsessed with something that only when you got away from it did you realize that you made some bad decisions along the way? Being a parent by nature, fatigue and having to pay attention to someone else gives you that distance constantly. So you start doing this cost-benefit analysis in real time without the emotional component of, I really want this to work because I really want it to work. Which is kind of interesting, because you start applying that elsewhere. If you remove the domain dependence of, this is for my kid, you start doing that elsewhere and go like, you know, I think I'm going to value sleep over seeing my friends again tonight. Or I think, you know, that ACL Fest is a great idea, but I think I'd rather see my friends. Like, you start to become very compartmentalized in your decision making. But that first week, you're going to have what's called this beautiful La Brea tar pit type poop. This is in high definition. Again, high definition does nobody any favors. So they tell you that this stuff is going to be a few days, and it's going to be a little bit. For my son, it was like a week, and you can't wipe that stuff off at all. Like, your kid's going to crap, and you're going to open up the diaper, and it's going to be in all these crevices, and you've got the wipes, and you're sort of like, all right, what the crap? And you're like rubbing your kid raw, and it's not coming off. Meconium, there we go. And you're rubbing, and he's just like, you know, and like, what the hell's going on? Because he's been thrust into this world, right? It's the existentialist crisis. You are thrust into being, and now you have to deal with it. And he's just like, well, dude, you're rubbing my butt. What's going on here? And like I said, so kind of the nurses go, oh yeah, it'll be a couple days. For me, it was a week. It was a week of this shit. Every 2 to 3 hours. And so you get used to it. Very quickly, poop stops being a big deal. So fun little bit. In the food and wine industry, women tend to be critics and tasters better than men. They possess better olfactory sensory organs. They, in fact, have a higher rate of what we call people who are super tasters, which is like, I don't know, 4K tasting. I'm not sure exactly what that looks like. But all of a sudden, you start gaining a sense of smell as a father for their butt that you just have no idea where it came from. Like, it's like Wolverine smelling saber-tooth in the bushes off on the side, like, your diaper is dirty, and it's not, nobody else can smell it. Nobody else can smell it, but you've evolved this wonderful olfactory function from just being around your kid. And it's kind of incredible. And then poop stops, not only does poop stop being gross, but you're totally nonplussed by poop anymore. You're sort of like, all right, my kid's digesting food well, that's good. Or oh, there's some poop up my arm. Okay, I'll just wash that up. No big deal. Oh, it's on my shirt, that's fatherhood. It just stops being a thing because you're constantly exposed to it. It's just not a big deal. That doesn't mean, you know, you're excited about it, but it just stops, it's just par for the course. Actually, no, that's not true, because if your kid's been constipated for 7 days, you're really excited about shit. You are just so on board with poop at that point. And then fatherhood. Fatherhood is so crazy. So we don't have a visceral experience of like having a kid, unless you're Arnold Schwarzenegger in that movie in the 80s. And so, like, 2 of you got that joke. And so fatherhood is weird. We don't have this oxytocin-laced, crazy experience of shoving a kid out and connecting with it and having it biting on our nipples every day. Thankfully, I'm very, very lucky in that way. And on top of that, early on, you're being ignored, not ignored like intentionally, like stiff-armed by your wife, but the baby is taking precedent. Cool, I get that. My marginal utility increases with age. I understand that. So you're sort of like rationally, you go, all right, I love this thing. I clearly see its resemblance to me because I look like I have alien eyes and wearing that funny hat. But fatherhood creeps up on you. Like you're taking care of the kid and you're going through the motions and you do care about it because you recognize this. But all of a sudden fatherhood just kind of sidles up beside you. You're working with the kid one day and just kind of bumps you and goes like, psst, hey, that kid there, you really want it to survive and thrive above your interests right now. Good talk. And it leaves. Like it's like that little like, psst, good talk. And then all of a sudden it's like you go through this wormhole of beautiful relation with your kid, and it clicks. It doesn't happen immediately. In fact, some of my other clients who are fathers talked about that. Like early on, it's this really frustrating thing because they're not getting attention from their wife. They can't really comfort the kid because early on, you're not really a sense of comfort. You don't have the milk, and you don't have mom's smell. That's why they encourage like skin-to-skin contact. You'd be laying there on your chest with your baby in its diaper, just on you, feeling, touching, communicating. And now my son likes me more than my wife, but that's just a phase. They'll go through it. They'll be like, I want mommy more than daddy. I want daddy more than mommy. So it does come back to eventually kind of pay dividends in that way. You're going to find that you start caring about things like schools. All of a sudden, your kid's 2 months old, and you're starting to worry about the neighborhood schools. You're starting to worry about preschool and daycare and all of this other crap and providing for your kids. There's a term, white flight, that is used when all of these previous peoples who are occupying the coffee shops and the bars in the city up and leave for suburbia because the schools are better. And this comes with some of that fatherhood element of like, shit, I got to provide for this thing, and I either have to do it monetarily or I have to do it locationally. You start caring about it in a really weird way. It's not something you chose to care about or even chose to take an active interest in. It just clicks like that whole providing thing.